Meeting of his presidency, Donald Trump has criticized just about everybody, friends and foe and fellow Americans. The only person he refuses to criticize is Russian President Vladimir Putin. Good morning, Rick Klein.
And finally, we can say definitively that they've met. He's contradicted himself on this in the past. They have met, and they're meeting more fully in a couple hours. So a big day, probably the biggest single meeting of President Trump's time in office.
President Trump, two minds yesterday, gave a very well-researched speech in front of Poland, but then caused a little bit of controversy when he had his news conference. Still, do we know if he thinks and agrees with the Senate and all of the intelligence agencies that Russia did, in fact, interfere with our elections?
We don't know that. He says probably, but then he immediately says that lots of others are doing it as well. You know, I talked to a Republican senator yesterday who said, look, this is as clear as can be. Privately or publicly, if you're looking at this intelligence, you know the Russians did it. So President Trump seems to be really the highest-ranking elected official to not accept that, and I think that spills over into the meeting today. It's hard to imagine him confronting President Putin with this head-on when Putin has denied it, and Trump himself does not seem convinced by the evidence.
I did find it interesting that then he blamed Obama for not doing anything about it.
Yeah, I think that because there's a contradiction in that, of course, that if there was something to do something about, Obama should have done it, but he's saying that it may not have been.
Right.
So I feel like he's tried to have it both ways, and I agree that it's been almost strange how little criticism he has offered toward President Putin.
Is there any agenda? What is there a goal? Is there a plan for them to talk about anything in this meeting?
Well, there's clearly some big agenda items that need to get discussed. The crisis in North Korea, Syria. There's some talk about missile defense as well, trade agreements, and the broader G20 issues. But what's interesting is that the White House has said that there is no specific agenda, that they're kind of allowing the president to go and wing it because he seems best on his feet and off the cuff like that. So I don't know that I totally buy that, but that's the official White House line.
Yeah. I've read some people who say that Vladimir Putin, a former KGB man, right, he's a steely-eyed negotiator. Yeah. All he has to do is say nice things about Donald Trump and then lead him anywhere Putin wants him to go. Yeah,
and to me that's one interesting thing about Trump, right, because there's a contradiction in him. He likes to be liked and likes to be kind of the life of the room. He also likes to be seen as tough, and I think especially at this first interaction, he's going to be very cognizant of the body language.
Yeah. Is Rex Tillerson going to be in the room?
Yeah, we believe he is. As is the Russian foreign minister and some translators. A pretty small group, but I also think it's interesting that they'll have wingmen. It's not going to just be mano a mano. Yeah.
Any chance of him divulging any state secrets like he did in the White House?
I would say yes. There's a chance of that. I think there's a very clear chance that it goes in any direction he wants it to. I think all these world leaders are realizing that talking to and dealing with President Trump is unlike anything that they've experienced before.
Rick, overall, Russia, France, some of the other European Union members who are at the G20 summit, have they said anything about this meeting?
I haven't seen much about the Putin-Trump meeting. I mean, they've got their own relationships with Putin to worry about. They also have other priorities like the climate accord, like trade agreements, like the EU and its apparent collapse. And, of course, as I mentioned, North Korea, Syria. So I don't know that it plays as big. But, I talked to a Russian reporter yesterday who said, make no mistake, the Russian people are as dialed into this meeting as the American people are.
Yeah. If Donald Trump doesn't bring up the hacking situation, you've got, 90-something senators who all voted to bring sanctions on to Russia. If Trump avoids it, does he get criticized from his own party for this?
I think he does, and I think there's a growing sense in Congress they need to rein in the president when it comes to Russia. There's a lot of discomfort even among his allies around this, and I think if he doesn't bring it up, people will ask about that. And you do have the looming issue of those investigations back home and his reaction to all of those that are separate and far and above whatever happens today in a 30-minute meeting.
Yeah, the meeting happened in about 2 hours from now. Rick, what's coming on Sunday morning on This Week with George?
Well, we're going to talk to the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, after this big meeting. Also, Walter Shaub, I don't know if you heard, he was the head of the Office of Government Ethics and who abruptly resigned after being critical of President Trump. So we'll talk a little bit about what it means to be draining the swamp with George and the gang on Sunday.
Never a dull moment. Rick Klein, political director with ABC News. Rick, thanks for joining us.